Bonjour, I'm Maneli Jamal. I'm an acoustic guitar player from Canada, and I'm here at Guitare Sèche headquarters. Going to be talking a little bit about this piece that I just played called Awakening. And in this exercise, I'm going to be looking at the introduction. This is a mixture of hammer-ons I'm doing with the left hand as well as picking out specific notes. And the combination of the two together, you get something that almost sounds like two guitars. And this is in the time signature of 7/8. So we got 7 different notes, and it's going to loop 4 times before we incorporate some harmonics in there. And this is how the very first section starts. So already with this, we have a very full sound to begin with. And if I was just doing the right hand by itself, that's what the right hand is basically doing. And the left hand, and I'm palm muting everything with the right hand here. So this is a very important combination that when you're combining these two things together, you really start to get something with a high attack because I'm hammering on the notes as I play it at the same time. So hammering on and plucking the note at the same time. So the combination of these two things creates something a little bit with a more punch. Now once you have this pattern down, the 7/8, you've got these harmonics that are just lingering and waiting to be played by your fingers. I do want to mention though, before I do that, I have the capo on strings 2 to 6, so the first string is untouched. This is still in the tuning of an open C, so we have a C, G, C, G, C, C. But notice again that high first string is not touched, so we get like a major 7 tuning almost. So as you're doing this, I'm using my ring finger and I'm flattening that ring finger on the crease right there to play the 7th fret on the 2nd string, on the 7th fret. Okay, so that's the first step. If you're able to do this, you can now go to the next step, which is using the middle finger to the harmonic on the 6th fret. Why the 6th fret harmonic? Well, I'm talking relative to the capo. Now, if there isn't a capo on the first string, it would still be the 7th fret. But visually, it looks like you're doing a harmonic here on the 7th fret and a harmonic on the 6th fret. So it's very important to get used to this because this partial capo stuff can be a little bit confusing, you know. So as you're doing this, 7, 6. Which is a little unusual because you're hearing a semitone, right? Sometimes it can be a little bit, it can clash, but I was going for this intentionally to give this kind of the sense of unease, you know, of stress almost. And then once you do this, as you know, you've got the harmonics in the 12th fret as well. So you can do the exact same thing on the 12th fret, and then on the 11th fret as well. So you got 12, 11. So if you combine those two together, you get something which is the main melody, the main riff of this piece called Awakening. And you can loop this over and over again until you get that coordination with both of the hands. Now this is only the first section of the piece. This is a composed through song, so there's very little repetition. So it's one of those things that you really have to practice each section 1,000 times before it's, you know, performance ready and stuff like that. But that's the beautiful thing about composed through pieces, that you really have to really take your time with a composition like this because you only have one chance to play it right, you know. So in this section now, we're looking at just the part that comes more or less right after the introduction. And this is still something that's happening where I'm palm muting all the notes with the right hand. And then with the left hand, I'm going to be doing a similar hammer-on technique. And I thought to myself, well, if I'm able to do this, it sounds a bit empty if I just repeat this over and over again. How can I now incorporate a completely opposite melody, a melody that doesn't have any sort of intricate picking like this or intricate fast notes? Maybe a melody that has notes that are ringing out, a melody that's ringing out. So now we are really working on the illusion of getting that two-sound guitar, one guitar doing a very simple melody. You know, as we're doing this, right, very, oh, what was it? So the melody for this section is just, right, so it's a pretty simple melody, but as you're doing these sort of intricate things with the left hand, again, you get this illusion that really there's a lot more going on. So really slowly it sounds like this. So there's a lot of different things going on. And the reason I palm mute this though as well, just to give you a little bit of advice on that, if you palm mute the bass notes, you have more room for the melody notes to ring out. And if you don't do this, for example, let me show you this example, if I did not do the palm mute, just so you can see the difference and how some of the notes might clash actually. Versus the palm mute. Right, so you get a pretty big significant difference. So it's very important that when you're writing your own music, as just a little tip, it's very important to sometimes have the bass notes be in the background. You know, I always like to explain it like a painting, a landscape painting. If you have a landscape painting in front of you, most of the time you have the foreground. It could be the house, it could be that tree that you love to look at. And in the middle you have maybe the grass or something like some other background trees or something like this. And in the background you have the sky, something that's a little bit more blurry, right? So think about this, because this is very much so in this idea that we have the foreground notes, the middle ground notes, and then the background notes. Right, so that melody is really that foreground, that house that's in that landscape painting. All right, so just think about that as you're writing your own stuff and kind of incorporating these techniques into your own playing. Okay, so now we're looking at the outro of this piece. And something that I love to do is I like to have the same theme in the intro in the outro, but to do something different. So in the very first exercise, we learned to do this 7/4 pattern. And this comes back at the very end because it gives the sense of comfort, right? And a lot of composers do this very often, in classical music especially, where they'll take a motif and bring it back to give you, okay, I've heard this before in the piece perhaps. And in this case, I'm doing that exact same 7/4 at first, but then the unexpected comes and then I do a little bit of a percussion thing. So like this. That's the ending of the piece. So you can see how powerful something like this, by adding some sort of percussive elements into this same 7/4 pattern, by incorporating a mixture of palm hits on the lower bout of the guitar with some middle finger hits that I like to do on the side of the guitar. And this is emulating a kick drum, you know, on the drums. And here we have something like either a tom or a snare. So utilizing these two together, you really get something like two guitars. You really get a percussion player playing alongside here. But the trick here with the left hand is to be able to do hammer-ons and pull-offs, almost everything. So the very first thing I do is something that I call a percussive strike. And what I'm doing here is I'm using my palm hit and striking my fingers down at the exact same time. Now, if you're plugged in a big speaker or you're playing live in a nice room, this can be a very powerful hit. Just like this. So this is much different than just doing the strum or just doing the hit itself. Almost every time I do this percussive strike, it's supposed to be a very explosive hit. So utilizing these two together by figuring out when to do this palm hit and when to do this finger can be a lot of fun, especially when you do something in sort of more odd time signatures like this one. And then I finally conclude at the very end with just some percussive strikes by doing a again, this is a palm hit percussive strike. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, open. So this is just a mixture of everything together. So I'd really encourage you to kind of explore some of these techniques as well. You know, this percussive style can be overdone, so it's very important not to maybe overdo it and be trigger happy and to incorporate this percussion in everything you do, but just, you know, how to do it tastefully. Maybe at the end of a song or at a specific bridge of the song, and not overdo it, because that can be ear fatiguing for a lot of players.